barbecue meatballs, sloppy joes, roast, slow cooker enchiladas, chili, stuffed peppers, and just a plain steak. So utilize those, and they're also healthy recipes that are good for you.
So there's tons of stuff you can do with venison. Those are just a few examples. The summer sausage classes we've got coming up. Just like to start things off, how many people have processed their own deer before that are here today? Great. So this is really good. Yeah, Mike, you should probably raise your hand. Well, when Jessica and I, we started bouncing around the idea of doing this, we talked to Dr. Renfro. We wanted to get on his schedule. He's super busy. He's got 1,000 things going on, but we thought this would be a really timely time of year to do it. I mean, modern gun season comes in on Saturday. That's when a lot of people hunt here. We've already had some people killing deer around, but for the most part, it gets kind of busy around this weekend. So this will be fresh on your mind. You're going to be learning from Dr. Greg Renfro. He's a meat specialist from UK. Before we turn it over to him, I want to introduce Mike Johnson. Johnson Custom Meats. Couldn't be doing this without him.
First off, thank y'all for coming out. This is our first time doing anything like this here, and we're glad to see you come out. Ask any questions you want. I'll be glad to answer them. Anytime through this, I will. I'll kind of show you our operation here in a little bit. We've been doing this for, I can't remember, since '08. I think we've been processing deer. We mainly do large animals: beef, hog, elk, deer, bear. We do.
How many bear do you get?
I've got one.
Just one?
So I can say I've done bear. But we typically got an elk or two every season. But we do a lot of beef. Past few years we've done 40 or 50 a year. Now I'm calling it here is from October through March, our open season here. We only run it seasonally, and we work out there in that field the rest of the time. But do a lot of hogs, and we do nothing but deer through deer season. Strictly deer. So it, like Reed said, this puts it really good timing for everybody that wants to go hunting and wants to figure out how to process their own deer and put it away, and that's what we're here to show you. And if it gets too much, if you say, hey, this is it, just bring it to me. I'll take care of it.
Before we get started, help yourself, and he and I will be going. We'll be getting the deer on the table, and then Dr. Renfro will get into his talk about
and
everything you need.
When we get done, if y'all still have the stomach for it, we got a little deer stew for you to try.
Cool. Was it a girl or a boy?
It was like a boy. It was a bug.
But it's always good to be down here. Reed was asking me how often I do this. This is kind of something I do 3 or 4 times a year in the fall, and I've done a couple already. And one of the things that we talked about is, what happens if we don't get a deer, because it's always cool, we've done a few videos with Fish and Wildlife, and they're always fun to do because they call me up and says, hey, can we do a video of you cutting up a deer? I said, sure. And then I have to block an entire week out for those guys to get a deer. And but it's always kind of cool to do those. So there are videos we got videos out there on our webpage as well. So if you need more information on what the videos they're shooting, we got that stuff out there. But one of the things that we talk about a lot, all right, and I make this comment to everybody, and I don't mean to pick on deer hunters, but I'm going to pick on deer hunters, all right. As a meat processor, if I treated a beef, pork, or lamb carcass the same way I've seen deer hunters treat beef carcasses, they throw me in jail. Be brutally honest with you, because sometimes you see that to where, prime example of gutting deer, all right? I have seen what I call the Mike Myers method of gutting deer, and like that. And boy, when you do that, you're just cutting all that digest open, and it's going to get all over the carcass. And everybody thinks, well, I'll just wash it off, all right? Can't do that. At the Meats Lab at UK, we're USDA inspected, and if we do anything like that, we've got to trim all that off, all right? And, you know, I tell folks, just because it's wet doesn't mean it's clean, those type of things. Now, you get the internal organs out. Now, I will tell you, there's certain ways you can do it. There's those gut hooks that people have where they look like a big letter opener. You can use one of those if you want to buy one of those. One of the things that we talk about is we try to teach folks is what exactly we do when we have a beef carcass, pork carcass, or a lamb carcass. We simply grab our knife right here at the hilt, just like that. And you can see I got my thumb and my forefinger right there. And I just come in here and I bury the handle of the knife like this. Yeah, we're good. And I take my fingers, see I got my fingers positioned, and that pushes all the internal organs out of the way. And I can do that pretty quick. And you see us on the kill floor, we can open up a midline in a pig quicker than you can probably look at, just like that all the time. Now
How do you get your hand down in there?
you just make little light cuts there, so you
Oh,
don't do
okay.
anything, and then stick
You actually
in.
put your hand in it.
Yeah, just put our hand in there. Yep,
You would never guess.
yep, yep. You gotta see us when we're eating on the kill floor. Apparently that creeps people out as well. But yeah, then some people will do what I call the V method, where they do one of these deals and they kind of V it all the way down. But you know, we're lazy, and we figure out an easy way to do it. This is what we do it. Is this method here, and if you got a carcass hanging up, it's easy. You just stand like parallel with it, and just straight down, and it's really easy to get in there. And you can see they've sawed open the brisket or the sternum. Saw that open so you get all those organs out. All that stuff on the inside, all right, these are ruminants, so like cattle. All that's nasty, all right? We want to keep that off the carcass, all right, from a food safety standpoint. Now, this was a bow taken deer, right? So bow's not too bad. I mean, we still have the arrow going in. And I've seen some gunshots where you got a lot of trauma to that area. You don't want to put that in your food either. You want to cut all that stuff out as well. And so you'll see us kind of avoiding that area, all right? Now, I did see one deer. I'm trying to remember what county I was in when I cut up a deer. And I did it for Fish and Wildlife. And they hit it with an arrow. And I think the deer was facing them. And it went like this. And all the way it came out back over in here on the other side. And went right through that rumen. And it was just digesta all over that guy. And they said, we just, you know, the Fish and Wildlife said, pull the loins out of it, we'll get rid of the rest of it. Because there really was nothing you could do with it. But those gut shots are tough. And, but you got to make sure, like I said, this is food safety. Do we have foodborne illness outbreaks that are related to wildlife? It happens all the time, you know, so it's not an uncommon thing. The other thing to think about, you know, it is November 6th, 7th, yeah. Life happens fast. Which means what? Next week it's going to be Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
The way it goes anymore. It's fairly warm outside. Very warm outside. I didn't even have to turn my seat heaters on in my truck this morning or anything like that. If you take a deer in weather like this, all right. So where I'm from, all right. Even if a day like today, if you shoot a deer, all right, standard Illinois protocol, I think it's in the laws in Fish and Wildlife there in Illinois. Your hometown, you got to drive around to all the gas stations to make sure.
Tied on your hood.
Yeah, but we got them out. We don't do that. We keep them back of the truck.
Oh,
all right.
okay.
But you got to go to every gas station and show it off. All right, and then just to be safe, you got to hang it from the tree in the front yard so that everybody that goes by gets a chance to see that deer. And, you know, people forget that on a day like today, you know, you're reinventing fermentation and slow roasting with those deer, you know. So we got to keep things cold. And the challenge you have is we don't always have a meat processor that has a cooler available to us, you know. But yeah, so a lot of times people will get them that day, and they'll take them that day and try to get them cold. But that's the key thing, is keeping them cold. Now, the one thing that Fish and Wildlife have been preaching as an alternative, if you are only concerned about the meat, all right? If you've got enough heads on your wall, all right, you can do what they call as a gutless field dress. So essentially, you're not getting into this internal organs. You're taking this off, you're taking these off, and you're taking the loin off. You're reaching in here and getting tenderloins, and you don't get inside here at all. All right, there's videos online of how to do that gutless field dress. And so again, if you're not looking for something to put on the wall, that's a good way of doing it. I'll never forget, years ago, the Fish and Wildlife called me up and says, hey, we got one and it's not too far from me. I live down in Richmond. Or for here, it's up in Richmond, over in Richmond. Up and over. And it was just about 10 miles from my house. And they called me and I went out there and they were showing me that gutless field dress. And one of the game wardens says, watch this. And he took his light and shined in the tree line and all you could see are eyes. They were waiting for us to leave. You know, so they even knew what was going on. So you do have some options too. It's your disposal. If you don't want to mount or anything like that, you can do that kind of stuff as well.
Easier to get it out too.
It's easier to get it out, yeah. Now here's the kicker, all right. You can go to Cabela's or wherever, Bass Pro Shops, or Amazon. I think everything's on Amazon now. And you can buy game bags, but you can use pillowcases. Obviously, we want to use clean pillowcases, all right? Because again, we're trying to keep all this stuff clean and keep it cold. The folks that did this did a tremendous job. Is they got the hide off this guy, they skinned it. Now, I had a neighbor, he's moved away, and he was kind of an interesting guy. He called me up one day and he said, I got an extra deer, you want it? I said, sure, I'll take it to the lab, make summer sausage out of it, whatnot. He brought it over in a box. It was a little bitty yearling deer, all right? And I honestly thought he hadn't skinned it yet. He had. It was covered that much in hair, all right? Now, I don't know if you guys have taken a deer before and you got hair on there and you think, oh, this is gonna be easy, hit it with water. It doesn't come off, does it? That hollow hair sticks on there like glue. Now, one of the things I learned from a mentor of mine, Dr. McKeith at University of Illinois, he was a big hunter. He's from Montana. So he hunted the big stuff, Is you get that on there, you can't wash it off. He would just get the torch that we use to torch pigs, to get the hair off pigs, and he would do that and burn that hair off. All right, so that's one of those little tricks of the trade that we use to do that kind of stuff. But, talking about this carcass, the one thing I noticed when they brought me back here, doesn't have anything to do with food safety. You notice anything about this guy as it sits in front of you? Look how big that neck is. He's in the rut. He's in the rut. And my meat lab manager is a huge hunter. He brought the deer in, and it was probably a third bigger than this one. It's the biggest Kentucky deer I've seen. Now, I've seen a lot of 325 pound corn-fed deer in Illinois, but I haven't seen that in Kentucky.
How big is that one?
Did we get a weight on it? Did we get a weight on it? Yeah, this, like I said, the one that Brock had was, we estimated, we put on the scale, dressed, and it was still 200 pounds. So he's big.
That's probably a 3-year-old deer.
Yeah. This one, it was 8 or 9 points.
Oh, yes.
And his neck was like that as well. And he didn't. And Brock thought, well, we got him before the rut, but when we got the hide off of him,
And what does the rut mean?
Means he's love is in the
I thought
air.
that's exactly.
But there's a lot of things we can learn from this deer that kind of gives us an indication of what's going on. One of you came up to me, was you, yeah, asking about feeding deer. All right. And I can tell you right now, just kind of looking at this deer, all right, he's had some grain. He's been munching on some grain. Look at that fat color. See how white that fat color is? That tells me he's been munching on grain, all right? If he was solely just whatever forage he could come up with, that would be yellow, okay? Grass finish versus grain finish. What we talk about in beef kind of equates over into wildlife as well. Now, why does that matter? It really doesn't matter, other than if you've ever had grass-finished beef, you know it tastes different than grain-finished beef. And people will say, well, which one's better? I say it's up to you. Whatever you think as far as that goes as well. But they do have a different flavor to them as well. You know, for example, when I grew up in Illinois, my grandfather used to remember him saying, you know, we just donate the first 10 rows to wildlife. And even when I was back home in August, the field next to where my dad's house is, you could see the bean field was stripped. You know, it was stripped of all the grain there. So it's pretty common. And obviously they have a higher concentrate diet, mainly grain. They're going to get bigger. They're going to get bigger. Just kind of like if we just eat nothing but salad, we should look different than we do now, right? So he does tell us a lot of what he's been eating. Like I said, you can tell he's been in a rut. He's got that white fat rather than that yellow fat as well. Now the challenge you have with these guys is you notice they don't have a lot of fat cover on them. Now if this was a beef animal, all right, I would let this guy hang in my cooler for at least 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks. If he's fat, I'll let him go in there a month. All right, and what I'm doing is I'm aging the carcass. And what am I doing when I age the carcass? I'm letting these enzymes inside here work on those muscles, make those muscles a lot more tender. So we make those carcasses more tender. The same phenomenon that happens in beef will happen in this carcass as well. But you can see the challenge we have, all right? When I weighed 380 pounds, I could take that cold January wind better than I can at 240, all right? And he just didn't have the insulation. So how do I get some age on this carcass without drying it out and making a great big piece of jerky? Well, you could take the risk and make it a great big piece of jerky, or you could simply put it in a vacuum bag, age it inside a vacuum bag, and then freeze it, all right? Now, with that being said, all right, aging is going to help you in tenderness, but like I said, they say he's about a 3-year-old deer. I could tell he's just looking at his rib bones. He's an older deer. You know, if you guys want to come up here and look at his rib bones, they're fairly flat and a little bleached out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he's young, they're red and round. All right. So my former grad student, who's now married to my meat lab manager, she got a deer by accident. She thought the deer was bigger. Right, it was evening, and she thought he was bigger, and it was a younger deer. It was a yearling deer, and boy, when he brought that deer into the meat lab, you could see the red, brown rib bones in there. So you can tell a lot about that. Now, why is that important? Well, younger animals are more tender than older animals. Older animals are tough. All right. The phenomenon that happens in older animals that makes them tough is the same reason why. If I ask each of you to bend over and touch your toes, all right, some of you would say no. Some of you would say, I'll try, but dial 9-1, and when you hear me scream, hit the other one, all right? We're not as flexible as we once were. It's the same phenomenon that makes us stiffer as we get older is happening in these animals as well. So even at an older animal like this, he's still going to be a fairly tough animal. Aging will help it, but it's not going to solve all the problems. Now, the beautiful thing is how do we deal with some of these tenderness issues? Those recipe cards will help you out because we cook things in liquid, like a crock pot. That breaks down that connective tissue, makes them more tender, all right? You also got to think about what these muscles did. Like, for example, these guys right here move this animal from point A to point B. They're going to be tougher. These back here that you guys want, all they did was support the skeleton. So they're going to be a lot more tender. Makes sense?
So back on vacuum sealing, how long?
Yeah.
Cut it up, vacuum seal it, put it in your
You can
refrigerator.
put it in there about 7 days or so, 10 days, and then throw
40
it in.
degrees
Yep,
or-
yep, just in your refrigerator, yep. They'll age
And
inside
then
that
freeze.
vacuum bag, yep, then freeze them. Yep.
So you cut it up and,
Yep.
all right, 'cause that was my question is, how big is your vacuum? Mine's
Yeah,
not that
yeah, no,
big.
you cut it up in your individual, you have to understand, you have to kind of follow along how I think and not what I say, right?
So Dr. Info,
Yeah.
talking about the food safety part, like we
Yeah.
could hang this deer at our house if the temperatures are,
Cold.
yeah,
If we're cold outside, if you,
40's lower.
and
Lower than 30 or what?
I would say below 45 at an average temperature all day long.
Never gets over 45, yeah.
Yeah, never gets over 45. And now here's what some people do, and this is up to you and depends how much money you want to spend. Now, you don't have to go out and spend the thousands and thousands of dollars for an actual meat cooler. You can get a air conditioner, get you a small room, insulate it, and get a cool bot to put on there. What does that cool bot do? It overrides that thermostat. So where your air conditioner, your window unit air conditioner may only go down to around 60 degrees or so, this will override it and get you down to around 45. It won't create a cooler, but it gives you some time. Give you some time. Other questions?
Coolbot. What is it?
Coolbot. Coolbot.
Yeah,
Coolbot. Yep.
and where would one acquire that?
Everything's on Amazon, online, yeah. Yeah, I have to confess, I can't tell you the stores, I just know online.
So if you age it without vacuum sealing it, like putting it in a refrigerator and a big dish pan. or
You're
something,
just gonna make it dry it out.
You're drying it out.
Yeah, you're drying it out. Yeah, so you're gonna have to wet age these guys. Put them in a vacuum bag, it would call wet age. Other questions? All right, what equipment do you need? Well, you see me in traditional meat garb. I got a frock on, I've got an apron on, I've got cotton gloves underneath here. Why do I have cotton gloves underneath here? They do protect my hands from the cold, all right? Are these cut resistant gloves underneath here? Nope. Will they give me a little bit of protection? A little bit, okay? I do recommend latex gloves or whatever you're comfortable with. The reason being, it's gotten to the point where 35 years ago, I used to cut meat barehanded. I can't imagine touching a piece of meat barehanded now. It's just with food safety standards that we have in the industry, I just would not do that. With that being said, these guys get dirty as well. You see I brought an extra pair just in case these got tore or something like that, all right? So you're gonna need that. You may need some rubbing alcohol. Why do I say rubbing alcohol? Especially if you're in the field and you're trying to either do the gutless field dress or field dress that thing, you might want to sterilize your knife and your hands and so on and so forth. Again, I can show you pictures of people dressing animals out in piles of leaves and pine needles and stuff like that. Well, this is my food. I'm not going to hurt myself, right? No, you can't. You can't. That kind of stuff. You need a knife, hopefully a sharp one. All right, knife sharpened, and wouldn't hurt to have one of these as well. This is a hand saw.
Big one.
Yeah, this one this is a 27-inch saw. You can, a lot of this stuff other than, Amazon online, Cabela's has this kind of stuff, Bass Pro Shops has this kind of stuff. So it gives you a reason to drive to Lexington and go to Cabela's, all right? So, but how I like to start with these guys, you're gonna see me do kind of a mixture of beef cutting techniques, lamb cutting techniques. I may even throw in some pork stuff in there as well. There's no right or wrong way of cutting these guys up, all right? Everybody says, well, what's the right way to do it? It's whatever you want to do, all right? Classic example, I had a former student of mine, all right, big time hunter, all right? Now, I mention this former student because he's a big time hunter. He's got a really cool job. He works for the New Orleans Saints as a lineman. So Landon, his family, big time hunters. They would just take the back straps out, or what you call the back straps. They might take the legs, and they would throw the shoulder away because there was nothing there. And I said, Landon, let's do this, this, and this. So I'm going to show you some stuff you can do with this shoulder. All right, you can do with the shoulder. Now, what I think is fascinating about this before we start cutting it. So this front leg, you can see how I picked that dude up. I can actually take this entire wing, if you want to say, off, and I won't hit one bone. All right. So this is not attached to the rest of the skull. That's why you see those folks that will actually come in here and do the gutless field dress, take these off and take those off. All right, and not really have to have a saw with them. All right. But we're going to pretend we're in a facility like this, and to make this guy a little bit easier, I'm going to take this neck off. And I'm gonna take the neck right off at the juncture. Now, that's a big neck there. He's in the rut. This, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I tell my students. The way I set this up, if you come up here and notice, and afterwards you kind of look at the equipment if you want, all the teeth are pointed away from the handle. Why? That's my cutting. And I have more strength in my tricep than I do my bicep. The other thing that I see my students do a lot is, this is 27 inches. We bought all 27 inches of blade. Let's use it. All right? And so my students, they get up here and they're like, but you can just let that knife, or let that blade do what it's supposed to do. You see that? And all I did was put a tiny bit of pressure on that and let that saw do its job. That's why I bought it. All right? I guarantee you, if you try to force that guy, if you try to force that blade through there, it's not going to go. It'll bind up on it. Just let it do its own job. All right? So, what can I do with this neck? What a lot of people will do with this is probably throw it away. All right? But this has got, you can see, there's a lot of meat on there. There's a lot of meat on there.
Dog food.
But a lot of dog food, yeah. And you could do that. You do dog food. You could trim it out for trim. All right, ground deer and whatnot. In the lamb industry, we would just start making about 1 inch chunks and make lamb neck slices for like soup stock and stuff like that. So there's some stuff you can do with it. Now, on a doe where the neck's going to be a quarter the size, may not be worth trying to dig all that stuff out. But this guy, you can tell he's got a lot of meat in there, so that's going to be worth your time doing that.
A quarter of the size for the doe?
Yeah, this doe is probably going to have a neck
Oh,
about
really?
that. Yeah. This guy's in the rut, and he's a big one too. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you, see that joint right there? There's nothing magical about taking that head off. That's called the atlas joint, all right? You have an atlas joint, it allows you to do this. And all you do is cut through there. I get my knife, and I come across, find that joint, go down, boom, come back up, cut across, and that head is free from the neck. You just cut through the soft tissue. You don't have to have an axe, chainsaw, saw meat processor one time, use a reciprocating saw, trying to do all this stuff. Don't do that, all right?
Can I ask you a quick question about the rut? So does that affect the taste of the meat?
Should. It's probably gonna make him a little bit more tough, and you can tell he's probably been chasing the does, and he
So
took
does
the fat
that
off of him.
decrease at other times of the year?
Yeah. When they're not in the rut, that
So
neck is a
what
lot
makes
smaller.
it inflamed? I'm sorry.
Well, it's just he's got his antlers on there.
Is it adrenaline? Is it?
It's a hormone response.
Okay.
It's testosterone. It's just testosterone.
It's
It's like a
testosterone.
I would
bodybuilder.
think it'd go in my head.
Yeah. Once he stops, once that season stops, he'll start to shrink up a little bit. Yeah. So, all right. So, do that makes it a little bit easier here, and I'll show you. Watch this.
Has he seen this before? He's very interested.
He's not throwing up. That's always good.
Yeah.
Does anybody need a chair?
Be able to see.
I kind of thought that, but I just wanted to. If you do, just let me know.
So you can see, I took that front leg off. Set this guy right over here, with really no issues whatsoever. I'm gonna roll him over, and I can do the same with this other side as well. Now, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm not for sure if the hunter is gonna like this or not, but I encourage them to try it. Now you can see we've got some issues in that.
Oh,
You guys look up in here, you can see.
yeah. Is this where the
Yeah,
arrow went in?
don't tell me those arrows don't do damage. All right. You can see we got it broke through that shoulder blade. You see all the trauma.
Is it all the dark that you?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
all
yeah,
that
it's
trauma.
all
That's
blood
all
and
blood
trauma
clots.
then.
Yeah, that's all blood clot in there. And
Yeah,
the other thing I'm fascinated about deer is you can shoot them and they're dead and they'll run another half mile.
Yeah.
Dead. Yep. So, we take care of that. I would not suggest using, you can see all that trauma in there. Probably don't want to use any of that stuff, all right? So we're just gonna continue to take this off. Wood.
Are you saying you don't want to use that as a food safety thing, or is it just
Probably a food safety thing, because I don't know how long they tracked this guy, how long he laid out there. You know, like Brock was telling me, Marley, his wife, she shot a big deer, and they tracked and couldn't find it. Called in the next day. They called in some dogs to try to find it, couldn't find it, and then he was just wandering through the woods one day, and there it lay, and it was big, and so they couldn't do anything with it because decay had already started to set in there, and that's one of those things is where if you shot it and we got it in here and we knew it didn't have anything in it, but you exposed that, so I don't know with all this trauma inside here, I don't know what's happened as far as the from a food safety standpoint. Now see I could cut a lot of this trauma off here and get at that meat underneath the trauma and be okay. So yeah, I could come in here and use this stuff for trim. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later, but the concept of making trim, right? Some of you may have different philosophies on deer fat. Let's put it that way. I've worked with deer hunters that think deer fat is the god-awfulest substance on the face of the earth when it comes to flavor. I had others that love it. You can see, look at all that bruising right there when I cut right through there. See inside that muscle, all that bruising. So, and, feel free to come up here. We're not in any kind of hurry. So, my wife is picking my daughter up from school, so I'm good. And there's no basketball game tonight. That's later on. But yeah, you can even see if you come back up here, look at that gaping hole there. You can see there's some hair inside there and so on. So that's probably not stuff we want to use.
So how far out would you cut then?
I wouldn't cut. I would just probably
Leave that.
take the loin out and just throw the whole thing away. There's just wasting your time on that kind of stuff. So, but you can see a lot of trauma inside there. Yeah, he's got this up in here. Now this is just kind of that bruising, that fluid that came up in there. But you can even see, even up in there. Look at that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's a lot of trauma inside that guy. Yeah, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's why we talk about I guess the best way to put it, if you wouldn't serve it to your family, your grandparents, you use your best judgment. You may not want that in your food, and so yeah, you can see. That's why I'm kind of trimming out here, just see how far back that trauma goes in there.
I think after they shot it, it ran a long ways, or?
You guys know any of the history of this? What happened with this shot?
No, I don't. The fella brought it in and we talked about it, got his bow and, that's it. But now one thing I tell all my customers, when I get into these deers, if I won't eat it, I won't put it in your meat.
Yeah.
So all that goes, no, I cut that off, throw it away. I'm sorry, quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't want anybody to get hurt. You don't want anybody to hurt. And, even if we flip it over, I'm just curious from my own academic curiosity on this other side. Okay. He seems to be okay back in here. But you can see a little, even some bruising. I would assume this is the exit. And here's another thing. Sometimes you have teaching moments when you don't realize you have teaching moments. I stuck my finger in there. Another thing to be careful of. I'm gonna try to pick this up, all right? Broken rib. And I'm gonna tell you, 35 years of cutting meat, some of the scars that you see on me are not from a knife, they're from jagged bones. And so you have to be careful of that kind of stuff as well. So.
And one thing too, if you do get one with a bow and it doesn't go all the way through and you have to unscrew your broadhead in there, be mindful when you go to processing it that it's in there.
Yeah, tell the processor.
Yeah, please, tell your processor too.
Tell the processor that there could be razor sharp items inside there. All right. But yeah, you can see, you know, back over here when I cut away that kind of blood clot in there, that meat underneath there is not bruised by any stretch of the means. So there's not anything wrong with it. Okay. But like you said, you know, I'm sure he could probably tell you horror stories of deer that showed up, have been foaming because they've been left out too long.
Ew,
You know,
that sounds gross.
Please field dress your deer in a timely fashion.
fecal material inside the
What
body
is the
cavity.
time of fashion of field dressing once it's been shot?
Do what, I'm sorry?
How long after you kill one does it need to be done?
Soon as it quits kicking.
Oh, I mean, immediate.
Yeah, you gotta get
You
that.
don't bring it home
After
to
picture.
village?
What's that? After picture. After picture, yeah. Now, that's a good thing, good point to bring up. You gotta do that pretty quickly. You've heard me say the phrase ruminant many times, talking about this guy. When it comes to ruminant, cattle, sheep, deer, elk. Cool thing is, in May or February, I go back up to Maine. I gotta work with some Indian reservations on cutting up moose. They're a ruminant as well. And I'm sure the ag agents will back me up on this. When it comes to feeding cattle, we don't really feed cattle, we feed the bugs inside them. So that rumen, the reason why they can eat all that forage and live is those bugs inside the rumen digest all that stuff, all right? And so that rumen essentially is a fermentation vat. And what is a big product of fermentation? Gas. And so you've got to get that out of there. I've actually seen beef rumens in one of our barrels. All right, the kids forgot to pop the rumen, and the bugs are still alive, and got inside a barrel where the gas couldn't get out, and it'll split the barrel.
So what's a rumen again?
Rumen is their big stomach.
Oh, okay.
It's not a true stomach, you know, but it's
Big vessel.
So where you have one true stomach, there's 4 compartments.
Yeah.
We don't want to say 4 stomachs, but 4 areas that
Yeah.
it goes through
Yeah.
digestion.
yeah. They don't have where we produce stomach acid. They really don't do that. You know, that's the bugs. Does that make sense to folks? And so that's why you got to be careful to get that out of there, because if you wait too long and you try to do that finger method, boy, that rumen has filled that whole thing up. All right, and that's why he's saying you got to, as soon as you can get them out, get it out. Plus that, you know, it ferments, so there's a lot of heat in there as well. There's a lot of heat in there as well.
That's why you see the deer laying beside the road swelling.
Bull.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So I'm going to do, since we got this one that's real trauma, I know he wanted some roast out of this, all right? This one's pretty trauma. You're probably not gonna do, I didn't think you were. So everybody kind of gather up here. Where's she?
Right behind you there. The yellow one.
There it is. I'm gonna show you something. This is one of those things that I showed Landon and so on. Now, the reason why you see me feeling here, I'm feeling for a particular bone. There it is. I gotta get my bearings oriented here. So, yep, this is the scapula. So if you notice my knife, it's not going anywhere. Watch this. A little bit further, goes in. That bone there is called, it's a scapula, but more importantly, it's called the medial ridge of that bone. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut on one side of that bone. All right, and I'm gonna pull something out that you guys are familiar with. Okay, it's gonna be a little challenge because this is, I'm trying not to get this bone to cut my fingers. You guys are familiar with this cut, but only in beef. But this is a beef cutting technique that I'm gonna teach you guys. So he lays really tight on that bone. So there's that scapula. You see right there the bruising in this cut right here. So what I've done, as you can see, come up here to this bone, follow this medial ridge on down, and you can see, the trauma of where that busted that shoulder blade. That's why I was being really cautious.
Yep.
in there because I didn't want to get my fingers cut. All right, but this muscle laying on top of it. Okay, I'm gonna cut this guy out. And folks that have done this, that we've showed this to, that is what you know in the beef world as a flat iron steak. So all I'm doing is cutting the meat off the top of this guy. Now this one, the hunter wanted a roast, but this side is traumatized up pretty bad. And so I'm gonna take this vein of connective tissue out of here. You can leave this in here. If it's a smaller deer, I'd probably leave that in there. But you can see I've created a flat iron steak out of a deer. So what Landon, my former student, would throw away, or you might just say, okay, I'm not gonna throw it away, I'm gonna pull the good meat off of it and grind it. Well, I've got you something else that's gonna be pretty good to eat right there. And the hunters that we've showed that guy right there, they love it. They love it. And some of these little ones, you don't have to take that vein out like I did. You can just leave it whole, and that vein's small enough it'll cook through there. But yeah, so essentially you can see on this deer, you can almost see that bone right there. Mm-hmm. Now this muscle on the other side is kind of like a rope or pencil head. It's thick at one end and kind of narrows down. So this is what I think is fascinating, all right? This is why they call us meat geeks, all right? This muscle right here is the second most tender muscle on a beef carcass. Obviously the tenderloins are the most tender. Second most tender cut, all right? I told you earlier these muscles were used to move this animal from point A to point B, and they're gonna be tough, and they are. And so how did that guy get to be the second most tender cut in the carcass? All this you're seeing right here, right through here, that's the rotator cuff. And when you hear the phrase rotator cuff, you think of baseball pitchers or golf, you know golf.
I think of
Pain.
injuries.
Yeah, injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, injuries to that rotator cuff, right? So I question you, all right? I've seen a lot of strange things in this world, but I've never seen a beef animal or a deer or a pig throw a fastball. So that muscle doesn't get used very much. And what happens when we don't use a muscle? Well, it doesn't get the big muscle fibers, it doesn't have the connective tissue matrix. And that's what's going on there. So that's why that guy's so tender. Now he does have that vein of connective tissue going down the middle that we got to deal with, but on the smaller animal, that's not that big of a deal. Now this is the other thing I think is fascinating. So this
that's
guy,
infraspinatus then.
what's that?
That's infraspinatus.
Wow, you are the first person in years of teaching this that knew that name of that muscle is the infraspinatus. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
How'd you know that?
I'm an athletic trainer.
Okay, there you go. There you go. That's your infraspinatus. Now, the muscle next to it, supraspinatus, all right? This guy is arguably one of the toughest cuts on the entire carcass. And I think that's fascinating because second most tender, one of the tougher, they're right next to each other and they're separated by 1/8 of an inch of bone. I find that extremely fascinating.
But that does this.
Yeah, it does a different movement, so it gets used all the time. That infraspinatus muscle he talks about, that's,
That does this.
yeah. And so what do we see cattle and deer and elk and pigs do? They do this, and they'll do this, and they'll do this, but they're not doing any of this stuff. Yeah, so it stays fairly tender. So give it a try. Like I said, he's been shooting videos. We got other videos on there, and then you got this guy. I'll pull it out for you. Yeah. Right there. It's kind of hard to believe that even deer have rotator cuff, isn't it?
Yeah, dogs and cats. And,
Yeah.
I mean, built similarly, not the same, but similar.
Similar but not the same. You're absolutely right. You can. Now this is one. If you want to feel it and wash your hands afterwards, this guy,
Oh, tough.
he is. You can
I can
feel
see
it
it,
how
yeah.
tough he is. Versus this one,
Softer.
he's softer. I mean, you can. That's why I said that is one of the first times I've cut one out. I mean, that dude is as hard as geometry, right there. Right. Or according to my daughter, algebra. freshman algebra.
So why would you not cut that out and use it for like sausage?
You could, yeah. And that's what you could do all that with sausage, but, and you could do that as a roast as well, slow and low. And that's why, and she handed out all those Cook Wild recipe cards. We're getting ready to do another batch of those. We're experimenting next month. I will say the last time we did one, we had a recipe for raccoon. Whew, that was rough. The old trash panda was no bueno. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That was rough. That's why the trash panda is not in any of the recipe cards. We're gonna try again. Somebody said, "Well, I caught a possum. We want to experiment with possum." No. We got a lot of squirrel ones in there. So you guys see, you can grind it. And that's what a lot of people do. But look at all the connecting tissue inside there.
Yeah.
Now you can if you wanted to. There's no rules that you can't do it. In beef they call that ossobuco. So you can slow roast that. One of my colleagues is from China. He loves that stuff. He said, "That's college. It makes you look younger." Well, he's about 15 years older than me, and I look 15 years older than him. So there must be something to it. In China, they talk about food as medicine, and so. I will say one thing, when I was in China, the Chinese food that they eat in China is nothing like the Chinese food we eat here. So, yeah, we put soy sauce on everything. There was no soy sauce to be found over there.
Fish sauce.
Fish sauce, yep. And the only time we saw rice was at breakfast. So I'm just following this bone on around. I'm gonna try to take this guy off here. And
So do you have to disarticulate the femur there?
you can. That's what I'm trying to do, is show you guys where all that stuff is. And so, this is where people have struggled a little bit with the gutless field dress, is finding that femur.
Right.
And see right there. I'm trying to get it opened up where you guys can see in there. I think I got enough peel back the way you guys can see it. So, I didn't need to dig in that deep. Alright, so this bone right here, and this bone over here, this is the pelvic girdle. And so all I'm doing is following that pelvic girdle on around, and I've opened it up. So if you guys want to look, that's where that femur is. See that femur sticking through there? Now notice this right here, this kind of soft spot on the top. That's like a little tendon sticking out. And as soon as I cut that femur just comes right on down. All right. Now doing this for years never bothered me. All right. And now I can't do it without thinking, well, it'd be 2 years ago in February, they came in here and they cut the head of my femur off, and they rooted out that joint, and then they drove a spike down the middle of it. And every time I do this now, I think, man, that's what my orthopedic surgeon did to me, So again, I'm just gonna come around that bone and free these legs up. Now, just let my knife be my eyes around this bone. That's really good on the edge of the knife. Boom. There's one leg, or ham, as some will call it. We'll do the same on the other side. Find that H bone. Now, heard the knife word? So these knives that I use, they're actual meat cutting knives. I buy them off of the meat cutting version of Amazon, which is Koch Bunzel. But you can get these anywhere. Now I will caution you on some of the knives, all right? and the reason why I caution you on some of the knives is there's some knives out there that people think are really good knives, and they are good knives, but they're good kitchen knives. But I would argue that they're not good meat cutting knives.
So what's the best if you're looking for a good?
Mine are all Victorinox Forstner knives. My meat lab manager, he likes Victorinox. He likes the Dexter knives as well. But here's what I've had a lot of people do. They go out and buy the Chicago Cutlery. Chicago Cutlery are beautiful, wonderful, wonderful kitchen knives. They suck as meat cutting knives. And the reason why they're bad at meat cutting knives is they're a softer metal. They're designed for you to come in and as a common person, they're designed for you to be able to sharpen them yourself without any knowledge. And so I've had a lot of people that buy those Chicago Cutlery knives and not like them because they just can't keep an edge on them. Because you can see I banged this knife up pretty hard going around bones.
Sorry?
And that's what this is for. This does nothing but hone the knife. And you can hear a little bit of a drag. That was a piece of meat on there. And pick it up. So the way this knife works, if you look at this knife underneath a microscope, you're not going to see a smooth edge. You're actually going to see teeth. In the industry, they call them feathers. All right? And as I cut and I start hitting bones, those feathers are going to bend over. And so what does that steel do? It takes those feathers and straightens them out. All right? Eventually, I cut and I start losing feathers. That's when it's got to go back to the stone and get sharpened up again. All right? So keep that in mind as well. So there's your hind legs. Did you say you wanted to roast those or grind them?
Jerky though, so you can do
Oh, I thought it was your deer.
No.
That's why I was looking. It's like jerky the deer. Okay, jerky the hind legs. Okay.
You wanted 10 pounds of jerky, so you can basically cut them any way you want to. So, you know.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave them there because I don't want to mess with any of your directions or anything like that. This
All I usually do is separate the top, middle, bottom round, and then run over the turkey slicer. So,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
Can't screw them up too much.
no, go ahead.
Okay.
What? Teach away.
Teach away. So what he's talking about is these guys. There's several different muscle systems inside here, and you see this femur runs right along here. You see this little line? That's the seam. So what I usually do is come in and use my knife as my eyes, and I can feel that femur right there. Okay? And what I'm doing right now, I'm just making shallow cuts, trying to find a seam. And you can see inside here, look at this. So, right where my hand is, see there's a seam inside there. All right? And all I did was went down right along that femur and found that seam. And when I found that seam, I just come in here and gently follow that seam on around. Like so. So this is what we call the top, right here, or inside.
Hi, doctor.
Yeah, it's your semimembranosus and your adductor muscle right there. You're absolutely right. And then right here is your big quadriceps muscle. And so again, I'm just going to come in here, top of that femur bone. Now this is be kind of some cool stuff to talk about. Now what I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to come underneath this femur. So what am I doing now? I'm trying to get around that kneecap, your patella. Yep, she's very Latin. There's another seam underneath here that I found. Let's take that guy off. Just like so. And so they're gonna make this into jerky. And I often joke about jerky. And the reason why I joke about jerky, it is one of the most regulated foods we have. There's a lot of regulations with the USDA with jerky. And the reason being is when you get into ready to eat foods, you got to be beyond surgically clean because it's ready to eat. We don't cook it beforehand. And so jerky, like I said, it is one of the most regulated foods we have because of that. Plus we dry it, and so that humidity, and we found that some bacteria can actually kind of harbor around themselves and protect themselves. If we don't have a lot of humidity, we can't bust through that kind of protective shield they got. And so jerky becomes even more of a challenge because of some smokehouses have to get up to that high humidity to make that stuff effective. And so I'm gonna take this front off because that's my sirloin. But like I said, jerky is one of our most regulated foods that we have out there because it's ready to eat the way we make it, and we buy it in a gas station.
You do SOAS, no SOAS?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
right there he is.
Yeah.
Right there he is. So she and I are talking in Latin terms, all right? And not only because I'm Catholic, but that's how we communicate in science is that. And she's talking about these guys right here. The Latin name is the psoas major. There's a psoas minor in there as well. You guys know them as the tenderloins, all right? And part of the reason why I was taking that off so I could get to these guys. And these are the most tender cut in the entire carcass.
And tasty.
And tasty, yeah. And so you can actually just kind of come in here. Now what I'll do sometimes is, you'll see me do this.
I'll grab your saw before.
Oh, I was about to crash and burn on my saw, huh? There's one. You can sometimes reach in there like I just did. Get your fingers underneath them, kind of tease them a little bit, and pull them out.
Is it better to take those out after you field dress so they don't dry?
Some people do, yeah, so they don't dry up real bad on
'Cause
you.
they'll dry out pretty.
Yeah, there's not much. These guys don't carry a whole lot of seam fat or internal fat in them, and they don't carry a lot of seam fat either.
They're the best leaf catchers on the
Oh,
carcass.
Yes, these things, especially if you're like in Illinois where you got to display these guys on your front door. You know, they're.
What I tell folks, sorry Doc.
Go ahead.
When you go to field dress it, make the smallest opening you can to get the guts out, you know, all that out. Because, you know, dragging it out, everything's gonna go in there. Some people will bring them in just like that right there, cut from stem to stern in the field.
Yeah.
And then they drag them out,
And
and
it's
that
got
just,
all kinds of
you know, so if you just make a small cut, and if you're gonna, if it's a big buck you're gonna make, you stop cutting right here. Right,
Yeah, they're gonna want.
Yeah, they want
Now, all that cake.
all that.
Yeah, they're gonna want all that cake. So yeah, you got those guys right there, your tenderloins.
What's the tenderloin do in the animal while it's alive?
Just support this underneath here.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't do a whole lot. There's the old urban legend. Oh, that's the one he uses when he defecates. I've heard that. The most expensive cut is the one we use. No, no. So, all right, we're almost done. We're almost done. Now, I'm gonna bring them up on these edge here, just so you guys see what I'm doing. All right. So, this is the most valuable part for you guys. The back strap or the loins, yeah, however you want to call them. Most deer hunters just call them a back strap. And so you see his backbone right here. I'm just going to come on the side of the backbone. Okay, come all the way down here. Keep coming. Just like so. Now you can hear that tick, 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 tick. That's my knife running over top of those ribs. Okay, using my fingers, kind of gently pull as well. Take these guys out. And again, I tell this to my students, and for 17 years of teaching that class, I don't care how sharp your knife is, it's not going to cut through bone. And so if you're cutting through bone, even if you saw, these are not saws, and so you're going to have to change direction. And so that's why you see me just kind of gently coming around these guys. Pull this out.
you run through those saw blades pretty quickly? Or-
Those?
Yeah.
If they're cutting a lot of beef, I go through one about a week. 1 a week or so. You'll tell when they get dull. They sound different, they feel different.
So how do you take your class without being in a program?
So, so then my meat science class I teach on campus. I'm teaching now. That's why I rushed down here. That's for my students. Yeah, that's for UK students. I do in the late spring, early summer offer beef and pork processing workshops, and they're designed to get you guys familiar with the concepts. Are you a full-fledged meat cutter when you leave the 3-day training? No. Do you know which end of the knife to grab? Lord, I hope so. All right, after that training. But in meat cutting, and I think you'll agree with me, it's like anything else. The more you do it, the easier it is, and the more you get out of it. Okay? So a classic example that I always use, I decided when I turned 50, I needed a midlife crisis. All right? So,
Let's hope you live that long then, huh? If it's
yeah,
midlife.
you gotta have midlife crisis when you get 50, right? Because I didn't have one in my 40s.
Used to
You're gonna be 100 then.
Yeah, I didn't have it in my 40s, you know. I was busy, you know, with trying to get, you know, promotion and all that other stuff. I got 50 and I was already promoted all I wanted. And I needed a midlife crisis. And so I thought, well, I work for UK, but I don't make Coach Cal type money, so I can't get a Corvette. All right? I've been riding Harleys for 25 years, so I already have one of those.
I just don't mind.
And so, get this over here, make it a little bit easier on myself. And so I thought, I love rock music, so I'm gonna teach myself the electric guitar. And so I actually worked with a guy who makes guitars. And I didn't see that, I'm glad you guys caught that. So I worked with a guy who makes guitars and made myself an electric guitar. It's a really nice electric guitar. And I go down to my basement about once or twice a month and fiddle with it for 20 or 30 minutes. And you can tell I'm still here teaching you guys how to cut up here and not on tour with Metallica. So, but the meat cutting's like exactly like that. You know, you got to get in there and do it day in and day out to really get the feel for how this stuff works and get good at it. All right. There's that. So, now a couple things on these loins before we finish up. You can see we only got the saw out once. All right. We still got a lot of knife work to do on this guy, depending on how much we want to cut this guy up. But a lot of you will see this loin, and you see this silver skin on here, that connective tissue. What that's designed to do, you see it all over. It allows those muscles to slide across each other, all right? But from a culinary standpoint, a lot of people want those guys off of there. And so what you can do is come underneath it like I've done, all right? Angle my blade up. I got hold of it back here. And if you got a fairly somewhat dull knife, it works out better. And just kind of ride that guy out. Just like so. Take it, get little strips off like that. And so that allows you to not only get that silver skin off there. See, you get a sharper knife and it'll always goes for the least path of least resistance. So you can do that. A little deeper. So again, it's all up
If
to
you're gonna eat the meat, you wanna get that off there, but what if you were gonna do like the jerky, or if you're gonna try that?
You probably want to get as much of this stuff off there as you can for
Regardless,
jerky. Yeah, and there's some guys that don't take it off. I'll take these guys off if I'm doing filet mignon, but for ribeyes, I don't take it off.
And you just cut it out when you eat it.
Yeah, like I said, I show this to deer hunters. It's kind of hard to see over this carcass here, but I show this to deer hunters because some of you guys are like, you want that stuff off of there.
Doesn't the fat tend to go rancid first if you're keeping it in the freezer?
It'll get freezer burn if you don't have, if you vacuum seal it, then you're okay.
Okay.
All right, and I'm glad you brought that up, guys. Segues into, the other thing we need to talk about. So now we got it all to where we can cut it up, and then I told you about aging it. Now aging it, wet aging it like I was talking about, you see, that's why you bring more gloves. So wet aging it like that is where you put it in a vacuum bag, all right? Now, you can, if you want, you can call up Thompson Equipment out of Cincinnati, and you could call them up and say, hey, I want one of those dual chamber vacuum packaging machines that I've seen at UK and all these other meat processors, and they'll say, you bet, $35,000. I can't afford that, or you got one in there, which is probably about $5,000-$10,000, or you can just go to Walmart and get what they call a suck and save. It's the same thing, all right? Probably less than $100 to do that kind of stuff. And so, keep that in mind, the packaging this stuff up. But then once you freeze it, you're good to go. You're good to go. As long as the vacuum stays intact.
How long would you say if cut them up, put them in the fridge, vacuum?
You can age them for about a week or so.
Okay.
And you make them a little bit more tender. Now, you're adding a little bit of more tenderness to it. Is it solving all your tenderness issues? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So what questions do you have?
With CWD around, of course, you'd have to disassemble it completely in the field without cutting any bones.
Any bones? Yeah. Yeah. So that's where the
In
gutless
those areas, yeah.
Yeah, that's where those gutless field dress comes into play. And that's why I kind of showed you on those legs.
And then are there certain organs that you should avoid, whether under the armpits or wherever?
Yeah,
certain
basically what they want is to keep the bones intact, and they want to keep the spinal
organ.
intact as well. Yeah, because what CWD, if you're not familiar with that, chronic wasting disease, it is in the same family as bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, which you guys probably know more so as mad cow disease. And scrapie sheep sets in that family as well.
What about that blue tongue?
Blue tongue is usually caused by a virus. But blue tongue is when we have a drought condition, like right now we're in drought. So the water tends to collect together, and you get those little biting flies, those midges, and they carry that virus. And essentially, if you see one with blue tongue, he's going to be a real easy kill if he's still alive. Because he's waiting for you to kill it. He wants you to kill it. He can't breathe. He can't eat. He can't drink. That's why the blue tongue comes into play. It just swells up. And so, is there anything wrong with those guys? Not really. I'd still encourage you to visit with Fish and Wildlife to double check, because they track that kind of stuff. Luckily, we don't have any issues with CWD in this state. With that being said, okay, we have had CWD positive deer on our borders. And deer, just because they found a CWD deer in Tennessee, which they did a couple of years ago, he was about 10, 15 miles from the border. Yeah, he probably walked up into Kentucky as well, So it is an issue, and you can eat the meat, you just can't eat any of the spinal tissues or anything like that. But because of our surveillance, I think they help me out if you know, there's a 10, 15 mile eradication zone they put around that.
But when it was found, it was down near the Kentucky Lake.
Kentucky Lake, yeah. And it was in Tennessee, but
it's a long ways from here, thankfully, right now.
Yeah.
And hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, hopefully it stays, but it's not really a question of if, but when, to be really honest with you.
They got that up in Michigan, and they actually shut down hunting season for counties and counties.
Just trying to eradicate it.
Yeah.
Now? Right now?
No, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's a nasty disease,
Can you tell that it's got it if you don't see the deer?
I can't tell, no.
So how about blue tongue? Can you tell them by the deer?
Usually their tongues are swollen real bad.
Right, but if you don't see the head.
Yeah, you don't see the head, I can't tell.
Yeah.
I can't tell, no.
What about butterfly and tenderloins? I remember you showed that last
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
That's
you
really
could
popular.
you could do that. So I'll just show you that real quick. We'll just cut this guy in the middle, because I don't want to screw up this hunter's deer. So, what I usually do, you can cut medallions like that. All right. Now, here's the thing. You know, you see how I got this guy close to the edge? And the reason being is I see a lot of people do this, and they cut. Notice how when I'm going through there, my knuckles hit the table. And so how do I get that blade through there? I twist. But if I get it towards the edge, see? I get towards the edge, and my knife can go flat without my knuckles hitting it. And I've got pretty much the same thickness all the way around. This is really fresh, so it's going to fall there. Or you could do this. Same thing, except for this one, I'm not going to cut all the way through. And this other one, I'm going to cut through. And then I just butterfly it open like that. Butterfly. So, and that's one way of getting a bigger portion size.
So can you
I'm
use,
sweating like I'm going to a tax audit.
You've been working, Dr.
like,
I know, I have been. Just preaching away here.
like bone broth? Would you do bone broth with these guys or not so much?
You could. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, again, making sure you got a healthy deer. And yeah, healthy deer, you know, they're pretty easy. You know, if it's an unhealthy deer, you can tell. You know, his head's down, he almost like shoot me. Yeah, he's just, you know, like prime example, you know, I work a lot with the University of Maine, and I go up to Maine about once or twice a year. And when I first started going up there, I started watching Northwoods Wall to get kind of acclimated to what I was going to see. And they had a situation where they had a deer, or it was an elk or a moose, that he had some neurological issue. I forgot what all that moose was doing was running in a circle. That's obviously an odd acting animal, all right? And that's a neurological thing, so you probably don't want to use that stuff. And that's why I say, you know, the liver, there's some people that want the liver, and look at the liver. If it is smooth and clean and has no spots in it, yeah. If it doesn't, if you see spots in there, there's parasites. Just
Don't go there.
don't go there. Yeah, don't go there, you know. I meant to tell you guys this. See that? That's that femur. What's that
Like a
femur?
dog bone to me.
What's that?
A dog bone.
Yeah, it could be a dog bone, yeah.
Ah.
But what I think is neat, see how it's kind of arched a little bit there? I don't know. I wonder if that's not part of the reason why they can jump the way they do. Is that, you know, a little bit, I don't know. That's, in my world, we call that a swag. A scientific wild A guess. So I've always noticed that in deer, they've always have that arched, you know, femur. And I've heard that in humans, that there's just some humans that jump higher than others, and they kind of have that arched femur. So I'm just kind of extrapolating that over to deer. I don't know if it's true or
I
not.
would think they land better versus jump better.
Yeah, but I've seen.
The forces. But
Yeah, oddly enough,
Such a shock.
I was on my way to Powell County. No, it wasn't Powell County. It was I was going down to Irvine, so it was Estill County. And I was on my way to Estill County, and I thought, well, this is no big deal. I live in Richmond, so I took off, you know, down to by the Bluegrass Army Depot, and here comes a deer running across the road. And I don't know if you've been down there. Those are like 8-foot fences. That dude turned on there, just cleared the whole thing. So he just is.
That's why I wanted a 6-foot fence on my front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Electric.
They can clear that if they want to.
Yeah, it amazes me. Where I grew up, there's a man-made dam, and there's just these huge rocks, and I've seen them just sprint down those rocks. It just, you know, it amazes me what they can do.
So do you want to go back, sit down, get a water, kind of decompress, summarize, anything?
One thing with the bone broth that we were talking about,
Yeah.
if we do, because cows really like bone broth
Yeah.
as well. If we do want to do that, if it's a healthy animal,
Yeah.
decide to do that, what are the best birds?
Probably all your big, long bones, your good ones, yeah. I would probably, out of the safety, just avoid the spinal column, you know, because that ribs, again, if they're healthy-looking ribs, you could probably do that as long as we avoid the ones where the trauma is happening, you know. Yeah.
So is there anything else left on that?
You can whittle it down if you want ground product out of it. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot. I meant to talk about that. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you got all this ground product. Ground deer's cool, but somebody's going to say, okay, let's make some summer sausage. and we got that class, so they can teach you all about that. Summer sausage is technically a fermented sausage, but a lot of times we, just for the sake of ease, we avoid the fermentation. We just add that acidic flavor to there in terms of like encapsulated citric acid or something along those lines. And the one thing that I would highly, highly, highly advise you to do, all right, you can go to any of these stores and buy these kits to do summer sausage. And they'll come with this pink stuff, okay? We call it Prague powder. Some of you might call it pink salt. You might even see it called Instacure. That's sodium nitrite, okay? That's sodium nitrite. And I realize, folks, there's this thing out there, avoid sodium nitrite. It causes cancer, okay? The reason why we started adding sodium nitrite to cured meat products is because A, it prevents the growth and sporulation of Clostridium botulinum, which is the pathogen that causes botulism, all right? The side effects of those guys, it gives it that cured meat color and that cured meat flavor that we like, all right? Does it cause cancer? Absolutely, it causes cancer. Here's the kicker, all right? When that study from MIT came out in the 70s, so some of you are old enough, you remember saccharin? It was the same study. And we started putting pen to paper, the amount of nitrite that they were giving those mice and rats to get cancer, it'd be the equivalent of eating 40 pounds of bacon a day, all right? I'm going to tell you what, right now, if you're eating 40 pounds of bacon a day, A, you're one rich dude, all right? And B, you're going to die of something long before the cancer hits you. I love bacon, don't get me wrong, but, 40 pounds of bacon a day is, whew. But yeah, make sure you follow that. And the other thing, too, is if it says this package per 25 pounds of meat, don't look at that pile and say, I think that's 25 pounds. Yeah, weigh it. And the other thing too is you notice how lean these guys are. If you want a little bit of flavor in there, you can add, pork shoulders, Boston butts in there. You get a little fat in there. So, some will do a 1-to-1 ratio. It's up to you. Whatever you want to do.
Y'all ever have anybody asking for bone marrow? Chunks of bone for bone marrow?
Not-
Or even for cow?
Not
for
for
cow?
deer.
Yeah, right.
People have asked for beef bones.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sell our beef bones. Can't keep them in stock
Yeah.
at the butcher shop because people want those marrow bones.
Yeah.
Butter.
Used to be cheap.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something, the landlord of the place I was living
Yeah.
at shot a deer. He didn't know how to dress it, so he called his buddy who was a Marine guy, came over, he showed him, so we ran through the process. And what he told us to do, he had us hang it in the garage and spray it with vinegar every
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
So what do you...
Yeah, so that's one of the things. So up in Bracken County, I work with their agent up there. They do a doe hunt because the deer have gotten so out of hand in Bracken County that there's a lot of farmers that are not even putting out cover crops because the deer strip them out. So they do a doe hunt, and they get a bunch of folks come in and do exactly what we've been doing, just cut them up. And the one thing I tell the agent up there is spray them down with a 10%, 15% solution of vinegar and water. Okay. With that being said, I say spray them down, not with the same sprayer you put your Roundup in. Right?
And what's the purpose of spraying them down?
That acid kills the bacteria, and so they'll do it up there and then cut them up. And then when we get the meat up there, you can tell they've done. You can smell the vinegar on there, but that kills the bacteria.
He did it. He said it just cured the meat too, in a way.
Never heard of curing meat. We always do it for food safety.
Oh, that was all. Okay. You
Yeah.
had a different idea about it.
Yeah.
You still did it.
We still did it worse.
If you're still doing that for food safety,
Yep.
how many days do you want to do that? Every day, once a day, a couple times a day?
Well, I would do it at least right before you cut them up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're all trained.
Just general where the cuts come from. I was real ignorant on most of it, truthfully.
Me too.
What cuts from even past years, just take them to the processor and I want.
Yeah. So now it makes you think.
Yeah, and that was my purpose for taking the
How
classes,
to
so I can
talk to a
talk
processor
intelligently
even.
to processors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling him a minute ago. A lot of people, they come to me and they say, well, I want my tenderloins sliced. Okay, they'll be this big. They're talking about the big backstrap
big
loin.
back, yeah.
So have to get on the same page with them as to what they're gonna want, how they want me to cut up the deer.
So I think my next one, just do all mine in tenderloins.
I will.
Yeah, they feel like this. A little more tender, you know.
Mike, who is that looking out the window at us?
Looking for scraps?
Bob right up.
You wouldn't believe this. I found that kitten over there when we were sitting selling produce this year. It was out there playing in the road, little bitty kitten. And what I thought was unique about it, he's got a blue eye and a green eye.
Oh.
He's also deaf. Didn't know that.
A
when we
lot
took
of
him
white
to the
cats with
vet.
blue, I think they all are.
That's what they
Yeah.
told us when we took him to get him fixed.
Mhm.
Oh, you can stand up over him and smack your hands in. You walk around and where he see you, you know, that's it. But we had to put him up because of the vehicles. But yeah, that's his house.
That's his house?
That's his house.
Peace, and Dr. Info come on.
Pleasure.
Lexington.
Appreciate all
Y'all have any questions, just reach out to us. We know how to get a hold of both of them, and we'd be happy to help you in any way. Maybe we'll see some of you at the summer sausage classes
Yes.
next month or so.
And if you're not, I'm sure most of you all are, if you're not on our mailing list, please call one of the offices and talk to one of the staff assistants and they'll get you on those so you can be up to date on what all's going on, because we offer a whole lot more than these things.
Yeah.